Journal entry number 12. When talking feels like doing. There is a strangely satisfying moment that sometimes happens before we have done anything. We tell someone what we are going to do. I'm going to write a book. I'm going to start exercising. I'm going to learn another language. I'm working on a new business. And the person listening becomes interested. They smile. Perhaps they say, "That's impressive," or "Good for you." And for a moment, it feels good. Very good. The book still has no chapters. The running shoes have not touched the road. The new language contains approximately 7 words, 3 of which we may be pronouncing incorrectly. But somehow, for a few seconds, we already feel closer to the person we hope to become. I have been wondering about that feeling, because talking about a goal can be useful. Sometimes saying an idea aloud helps us understand it. Sometimes telling someone creates accountability. Sometimes another person gives us encouragement, advice, or support that helps us continue. There is nothing wrong with talking about what we hope to do. But I have started noticing something uncomfortable. Sometimes talking about doing something feels surprisingly similar to doing it. Not logically. I know the difference between saying I will write and actually writing. But emotionally, the boundary can become less clear. The conversation gives me a little satisfaction, a little recognition, a little sense of movement, and perhaps even a small piece of an identity I have not yet earned. Why should merely describing a future action feel rewarding now? Perhaps because many goals are not only about outcomes, they are also about identity. We do not merely want to write a book, we want to become a writer. We do not merely want to complete a course, we want to become knowledgeable. We do not merely want to launch a business, we want to become an entrepreneur. Behind the action is often a quieter sentence. This is the kind of person I want to be. And that changes what happens when other people recognize the goal. There is a psychologist named Peter Gollwitzer whose work made me look at this differently. In his research on identity-related goals, Gollwitzer explored the idea that part of an identity can exist in what he called social reality. The phrase caught my attention. Social reality. In simple terms, some identities do not exist only inside us. Part of possessing them involves being recognized by other people. A person does not simply think, "I want to become a lawyer." There is also a world in which other people begin to see that person as someone becoming a lawyer. The identity gains social evidence. In 2009, Gollwitzer and his colleagues published a study called "When Intentions Go Public." They examined what happened when people's identity-related intentions were noticed by others. In several experiments, people whose intentions had been noticed sometimes acted on those intentions less intensely than people whose intentions remained unnoticed. The studies included students committed to becoming psychologists and law students committed to becoming successful jurists. These were not simply vague wishes. They were intentions connected to identities the participants cared about. The researchers suggested that recognition could create a premature sense of possessing the identity being pursued. Premature. That word matters. The identity feels a little more complete before the work that normally completes it has been done. Imagine saying, "I'm writing a book." Someone responds, "You're an author now." It is generous, encouraging, kind. But something interesting has happened. For a moment, I am being treated as the finished identity. Writer, author, creator. The world has reflected the identity back to me, and perhaps some small part of me relaxes. Not enough to abandon the book, not necessarily, but enough to receive a taste of completion, a reward before the work. It does not even require a conversation. We can buy the equipment, create the workspace, design the logo, choose the notebook, make the schedule, post the announcement, read 5 articles explaining the perfect way to begin. None of those things is automatically pointless. A runner needs shoes. A business may need a domain. A student needs materials. Preparation is real work when it removes obstacles to action. But preparation can also become a very convincing costume for action. That is where I get suspicious. There is a particular pleasure in setting up a new project. Everything is clean. Nothing has failed yet. The schedule assumes that future me is remarkably disciplined and apparently wakes up enthusiastic every morning. At that stage, the project exists mostly as possibility, and possibility is flattering. The unwritten book may still be brilliant. The untested idea has not yet encountered reality. Doing changes that. Doing introduces friction. The first page is awkward. The first attempt is slower than expected. The market does not respond. The code breaks. The pronunciation sounds wrong. The exercise is tiring. The beautiful identity meets the ordinary labor required to construct it. Perhaps that is why talking can sometimes feel better. Talking gives us the narrative. Doing gives us the evidence. I can describe a book in 2 minutes. Writing it may take months. I can explain a business idea over coffee. Building it may require hundreds of decisions nobody will applaud. I can announce that I'm learning a language. Actually learning it means repeating words I keep forgetting, practicing badly, returning tomorrow, then returning again. The identity can be spoken in a sentence. The evidence is accumulated in tiny pieces. Before I tell anyone about the project, there may be tension. I want to become something that I am not yet. There is distance between the present self and the desired self. That distance can be uncomfortable. It asks something of me. Then I talk about the goal. Someone recognizes it. They become excited. They see me differently. For a moment, the distance feels smaller. But did I actually cross any of it? That may be one of the most useful questions I can ask myself. Did the conversation create progress, or did it create the feeling of progress? Those are not always the same thing. But the lesson cannot simply be, never tell anyone your goals. That would be too easy, and it does not fit all the evidence. More recent research has found that sharing goals can also help people receive support, increase effort, and sometimes make more progress. So talking is not the enemy. Perhaps the important question is, what does the talking do next? Does the conversation create a bridge to action? Or does the conversation become the destination? Does the person I tell help me continue? Do they ask again next week? Does saying the goal aloud clarify my next step? Or do I mostly enjoy hearing myself describe the future? That distinction feels more useful. Suppose I tell a friend, I want to run a marathon. My friend says, that's incredible, you're becoming a runner. We spend 20 minutes imagining the event. I go home feeling inspired, and tomorrow, I do not run. The conversation gave me emotion, but no structure. Now imagine the friend says, that's great. When is your first training run? Tuesday morning. Then Tuesday arrives. A message appears. How did the run go? Now the social reality is doing something different. It is not merely confirming the identity, It is supporting the behavior that could eventually justify it. Same goal, same act of sharing, different function. Maybe I do not need less encouragement. Maybe I need encouragement pointed at the work. Not, "You're such a writer," but, "What did you write?" Not, "You're serious about learning," but, "What can you explain now that you could not explain last week?" The first celebrates identity. The second returns attention to evidence. That word keeps returning. Evidence. What evidence did I create today for the person I say I want to become? Not proof for other people, evidence for myself. A paragraph, a practice session, a completed lesson, a customer contacted, a difficult problem attempted, a mistake examined instead of hidden. These things are often unimpressive from the outside, but they have weight. They exist even if nobody applauds. What if identity is better treated as something accumulated rather than announced? Instead of saying, "I am disciplined," I collect disciplined actions. Instead of saying, "I am a learner," I collect questions, attempts, corrections, and returns. Instead of saying, "I am a writer," I write. The identity can still give direction, but perhaps behavior should carry more of the argument. There is something peaceful about that, because it reduces the need to confuse anyone. I do not have to perform the future version of myself. I can work quietly on the evidence. Today may produce only a few lines. Tomorrow may produce a failed attempt. But gradually, the evidence accumulates, and eventually, the identity becomes difficult to dispute. Not because I announced it convincingly, because I kept returning to the work. The beginning says, "I want to become this." The middle asks, "Will you continue when becoming this no longer feels exciting?" That is a much harder question. I have noticed that some of the most important work happens after the conversation has ended, after the enthusiasm fades, after nobody is watching, after the plan has been admired, after the notebook has been bought. There is a quiet moment when only the task remains. Open the document, read the chapter, make the call, do the repetition, fix the mistake, begin. That moment contains very little social reward, but it may contain most of the actual transformation. Perhaps we should be careful about taking emotional payment for work we have not yet completed. Not because pleasure is bad, not because goals must remain secret, but because satisfaction can sometimes close a gap that action still needs to cross. The danger is not that other people believe in me. The danger is that their belief becomes a substitute for my behavior. Sometimes talking also protects the perfect version of the goal. As long as the book remains an idea, it cannot receive a bad review. As long as the business remains a plan, customers cannot reject it. As long as the skill remains something we are going to learn, we never have to discover how difficult the first lesson feels. Talking preserves possibility. Doing exposes it to reality. Reality is less flattering, but reality teaches. Action gives feedback, and feedback is how the fantasy begins becoming a skill. Perhaps some goals benefit from being spoken, others benefit from being protected from premature applause. If I need support, I should tell someone capable of supporting the action. If I need accountability, I should tell someone who will ask about the evidence. If I need advice, I should speak to someone who understands the problem. But if I mainly want the warm feeling of being seen as ambitious, perhaps I should notice that too. No shame. Just notice it. I wonder how many times I've confused articulation with execution. I understood the project clearly enough to explain it, so I felt as though I had advanced it. I made a detailed plan, so I felt productive. I discussed what I would learn, so I felt like a learner. But the task was still waiting exactly where I left it. Words can create a map, but a map is not distance traveled. We need maps, we need plans, we need conversations. We need people who believe in what we're trying to do. But eventually, there must be footsteps. The plan must become behavior. The identity must acquire evidence. The future tense must become something that happened today. Maybe the goal is not to stop talking about our ambitions. Maybe it is to become more careful about what we allow the talking to mean. A declaration is not an achievement. An intention is not evidence. Recognition is not completion. Excitement is not progress. They can help. They can point us forward, but they cannot do the walking for us. So the next time that little burst of satisfaction appears after describing something I intend to do, perhaps I can enjoy it. Then pause and ask, what is the smallest piece of evidence I can create now? 1 paragraph, 10 minutes of practice, 1 page, 1 call, 1 attempt. Something small enough that I cannot hide behind planning it. Something real. Because maybe the person I hope to become does not need another announcement. Maybe she needs another repetition, another ordinary day, another quiet piece of work, and then another. That's today's entry. I'd love to hear where this idea takes you. Is there a goal in your life where talking about becoming the person has started to feel a little too much like actually becoming the person? And what piece of evidence could you create instead? Until the next page, stay curious.